Hello. Oh, maybe a little loud. And we are on. So, did everyone have a good weekend? Yeah? I had a weekend. I had a lot of homework this weekend. I had administrative homework this weekend. So, hey everyone, we're gonna jump back into Rhino. Before we do, let's check in with the timeline here. Let me double check that I'm recording. Yes. I just have a couple of announcements. First of all, if you have not already voted, do it. Most likely, if you're not local, you probably already have voted. If you're local, maybe there's a chance you could still vote today. So yeah, a good thing to do all around. So yeah, what else? Today we are going to spend one more day sort of really modeling in Rhino. And then on Thursday, we're going to start lighting what we've modeled. And then on next week, we're going to start doing materials. So those are, the things that make it look like wood or stone or whatever. So, so that's kind of where we're going in the future. And then the week 11 Thursday, which is next week, I do have sort of I have a short lecture planned, although if you have questions, like big questions, long questions, that you want to address about Rhino, I can certainly spend some time doing that. Although I can take time any day to answer your questions, but we might have a special sort of day dedicated to that, or also special issues that might come up in the next couple of classes. So, and then after that, we're moving on to coding. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, on week 12 Tuesday, which is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I'm going to introduce the code unit, but we're not going to really like get into it too hardcore. So if you're traveling or anything like that, should be fine. If anybody plans on coming to class here on Tuesday before Thanksgiving, guess what? I'm going to be here, and you'll get to see me in person, and I'll get to see you in person, and that'll be nice. So, and then of course we have a break for Thanksgiving. And then after Thanksgiving is pretty much all code all the time. So before we jump into Rhino and kind of jump in where we left off on last Thursday, does anybody have any questions or concerns that they want to address? Okay, all right. Great, well then let's jump into Rhino. So as you may have noticed in the sort of addendum video that I put up, I literally like 30 seconds after getting to my office, I was able to kind of undo enough steps to get this thing to work. And my theory about why it wouldn't form a solid was true. It was this curve that we had made where it was like questionably planar. So I guess if anything, like, that is maybe one of those situations where I'm making the mistakes so you don't have to, or I'm making the mistakes so that you can know how to get your way out of them. But I think if anything, that kind of episode just illustrates how important it is to have your snaps set up and to actually use the snaps. So probably what happened was I was just looking out while I was not doing something, and one of those little snaps went awry, and then it caused me that problem later on. So that's the lesson there. Snaps, snaps, snaps. So now that we have this thing built, I sort of, as you may have seen in the addendum video, I kind of redid these two curves. And as I was doing them in a little bit of a hurry, because I kind of wanted to get this figured out, so I didn't really think too much about the shape of the curves. And now it looks like my boat is kind of saggy. And that's not super fun. So I want to come up with some way to take all these four surfaces that I have. There should be one on the side, one there, one there, one there. And I want to basically take it, and instead of scaling it, this is a technical term, I want to scoosh it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these surfaces, and then we are going to, it looks like I've already converted it to a solid, by the way, because it's reporting down here that it's a polysurface. That makes sense, because the last time I was here, we were trying to make it a solid. Doesn't matter whether it's a solid or not. So then I'm going to go over to the scale menu, and that's over here. And instead of doing scale 2D or 3D, I'm going to do scale 1D, which is super fun. And I think for my base point, I'm just going to identify this point right here. You can see it snapping, which is nice. The midpoint is one of the points that I usually keep selected in here. This is sort of you can see which ones I tend to use. Those are the ones that I kind of keep on by default. So I'm going to grab this point as the base point, and then it's kind of arbitrary, like where you set the other point. You just want to make sure that it's not, like in this case, see how it snapped to the midpoint of this line? That's not so good. I actually want it to be like a nice straight line that goes straight down, because I want to scale it straight up, right, and have it be even. I won't say uniform, because this is a non-uniform scale. So I'm just going to use the ortho command by hitting the shift key, and I'm just going to grab like a point close to the bottom down here. And now I can take it and scoosh it up. Scoosh is a wonderful, not a real word. Also, another one of my favorite not real words that is somewhat similar is zhoosh. It's a real word. I think it's Yiddish. It means to take something and shove it over. So anyway, we've got this thing looking a little more svelte and a little more elegant, maybe. And yeah, just in general, looking a little more seaworthy. So as I said before, this polysurface is a solid. So I think the next thing we want to do, and let me open up my little list here. The next thing that we're going to want to do is to use the shell command to kind of hollow this out. So the shell command is something that we've looked at before, but we're going to do it again. And in this case, we're selecting faces from the closed polysurface to remove. So basically that means whichever face you want the hole to be on, and in this case we want the hole to be kind of in the top of the boat. So we can just select that, and then we also have to think about the thickness. So let's zoom in here and just take a quick look at the grid. So it looks like we have a 1/4 inch grid, so each of these small squares is a 1/4 inch, and each of the large squares is an inch, because we used the default template for inches. So if we take this and just kind of look at it, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think a 1/4 inch would be fine. We could probably go even half of that, which, guess what, is 0.125, so that's an eighth. So we could probably just stick with that. And that is going to give us sort of a thin shell. I'm asking to make it a thin shell for a couple of reasons. We might add some things on later as time permits, but there are some other things that I'd like to make sure that I get through today. So we'll see how much we actually work on the inside of the boat. But at minimum, one thing I would really like to add is I'd like to have like a seat, right? And so that's actually a little bit more complicated than it seems, because we would be taking that seat and we would be kind of suspending it between these two curved objects. So it's not as simple as just like drawing a rectangle, extruding that into a surface, right? This is a little bit more complicated. So probably what I would recommend in this case is to take the regular old polyline tool, and I think I'm going to keep my top view up here. And I'm going to use just this near point right now to just identify a point. It doesn't have to be like mathematically perfect, because I don't really have any preconceived notion of where the seat should go, like exactly. I can basically eyeball it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this point right here. And if we hit the Shift key, we should be able to enable that ortho mode. And then it should snap. If you have intersection enabled down here, it should snap to some sort of an intersection point. And then I'm just going to hit Enter. And then I'm going to do the same thing a little ways down. So I could snap to this midpoint, that's fine. And then I can just use this midpoint right here. And so now what we have is the potential opportunity to use an edge curves surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this edge right here, this surface edge, this line, and this line to create a surface. Okay? So if we go in here to edge curves, select 2, 3, or 4 edge curves. I want the poly surface edge. And same here, I would like the poly surface edge. And then here and here, oh, not that one. Sorry, I got to start over. Sometimes if you zoom in, you can get a little bit, like there's a lot of stuff going on here. So if I zoom in, I can get kind of a clear area. It didn't work either. All right. So, so I think what the next thing to sort of think about is probably chopping down these surface edges. So probably the easiest way that we can do that, let's see. Let me just make sure everything's cool here. So one of the ways that we can do that to basically like extract the curve so that it's not a big long curve is to take this object and then we're going to go to curve, curve from objects and then extract curve. So then we should be able to, nope. Sorry, wrong one. Let's see, curve from objects. Let's do extract wireframe, and that will definitely get us what we want. So it says select surfaces, solids, blah, blah, blah. So we're just going to do the whole thing here. And so what that has done for us, let me go ahead and put this poly surface on a different layer so you can see. So I'm going to put it on layer 4 by saying change object layer. So what that does is it basically extracts all of those lines and turns them into curves. This is actually quite awesome because what can you do? You can do stuff with those curves. You can make other things. So definitely with Rhino, like making things from making things is a thing, and it's good. So in this case now, we still have to kind of chop this curve down. So what's a good way to do that? So probably the most straightforward way to do that is to use the trim function. So if we go ahead and try, no, I said trim. So in this case, we can use these little guys. I'm just going to try this, using these little guys as a cutting object, and then hit enter, and then this is the curve that we want to split. So that was good, but that actually did the exact opposite. That was really close. It did the exact opposite of what we wanted. So I'm just going to hit Control-Z, and basically it's saying what in the prompt, it's asking you select object to trim. That's kind of vague. What it's really asking you is select object to trim off. And so that would be this edge here and this edge here. Let me just scooch this back. Okay, so then that leaves us with our little curve segment that we actually need. And then let's go ahead and do this one over here while we're all nicely zoomed in and everything. Oops, excuse me. Let's do this and this. So actually, that was the wrong one. I did get glasses, but you know, they're not perfect. It's this one. So there's still now we still have that wonderful curve. Okay, so one thing we can definitely do is we can probably take all of these other curves. I'm going to just try to select them. And to do that, I have to get out of this function, so I'll hit enter. So one thing that we want to do is probably get rid of these. And by get rid of them, I mean, I don't know if you should totally get rid of them. We can probably just put them on this CC layer, and then they can kind of live there. So I'm going to just double tapping here and change object layer. Okay, and then also I just want to go ahead and grab these other little pieces. Basically everything except the thing that we wanted to produce. And those are going to go on here. And so now we have this like lovely little planar thing that we can kind of mess with. And probably what we want to do is just take these 4 curves. Probably the first thing I would maybe do is, it's actually not necessary, but I could join them, and by joining them, that would basically make them into one closed curve. We're going to use the planar curves method to create the surface, but actually, if I think maybe like one step forward, planar curves gives you like a single flat surface, right? So what we're really going for here is like something that looks like a board, right, that you can sit on. So it's something that has thickness. So actually, it seems like probably what we really want here is to go to the solid menu and then go to extrude planar curve straight. And that should give us like a fully realized solid. Yeah. Do you want my honest answer? Because I don't feel like it. But yes, that is totally a thing that you could do, and I will be demonstrating that at some point. Yeah, the Boolean method, we're just kind of not there yet. I was going to show curve Boolean today and then kind of work our way up to Boolean, but yeah. It's totally, yeah. I mean, part of it too is that like there are so many tools in Rhino like that it's sometimes like doing it the hard way, like now you know how to get inside curves, you know, which is also really useful. So there's just different pros and cons to different methods. But yeah, I did kind of do it the hard way, actually, just now. Okay, so anyway, we're doing this extrude planar curve thing, and I don't really want it to be very thick. I'm just probably going to go for now you'll notice that I have the grid snap set up, so I might actually turn grid snap off so I can get it kind of even, you know, half a unit here. And then just turn the grid snap on real quickly. And so that's pretty much taken care of, I think. And oh, good. I'm so glad that the boat didn't just disappear. So real quickly, I think I'm going to grab everything on this layer and just kind of organize my file a tiny bit. So I'm going to call this boat. That's a super innovative name. And I'm going to go ahead and just put everything that is boat on this boat layer. So also, this preview color on the side is something that is just kind of defaulted by Rhino. You can just click on the color and pick a less offensive color. I kind of should maybe pick like a color that's a little bit not white because, you know, I know that we need some visibility in this context. So just know that whatever nasty color you're using in the preview, that when you go to render it and put materials on it and light it, it's most definitely not going to look like that. It's only for the sort of preview purpose. Yeah, hi. Sure. So it's actually a layer color. So if you go into the layers palette and then just click the color next to the layer, it brings up a menu where you can, you know, pick a color. And yeah, this is something that, I mean, it's nice to do if you're just like presenting it straight from the from the sort of as a non-rendered object. You can make it some color other than gray. But most of the time, I end up actually rendering, which we'll get to next week. So, okay, so now our boat has a seat. And actually, I think that, what's your name again? What's your name again? Jewel. So, excellent. So I think actually the next thing that we do, maybe I'll have the opportunity to use a Boolean function. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to take this boat and I want to make a mast. And so here is where we're going to look at the curve Boolean function. So I had mentioned this in class earlier that I really want the mast to look like some kind of like narwhal horn, So it's basically like big and spirally, right? So what we need to do in that context is I'm going to start in the top view because it's going to come straight up out of the boat. And I'm going to start working on it like over in a sort of empty area of the workspace. And then when it's done, I'm going to move it into the boat. And then I'm going to have it intersect with the seat. So narwhal horn. Well, I think that probably just for the flat part, it's probably a great idea to have something like this. And now, let's say I want to take these shapes and I want to say, hey, Rhino, I would love to make a surface out of these shapes that, goes straight up. What is that going to look like? Well, I can tell you what it's going to look like. It's going to look like two forms with a hole in the middle. So we actually want it to be like a solid thing, right? So I want to eliminate this intersection in the curves. So I'm going to show you a really powerful way to edit curves, and it's over here in the curve menu. It's called Curve Boolean. And with the curve Boolean, it basically gives you the option of taking two or more. You can do like up to 100 curves that are intersecting, and then you can pick a bunch of areas that you actually want to keep, and it'll sort of process that for you. So in this case, we want to keep all three areas, right? But you can see how I could have many options here. So I want to keep all three areas. So actually, that outside curve is what you're looking for. That black curve is what's going to end up resulting. And then you can just take that curve and stick it over here, or move it somewhere else. Now, there's a couple more things that we need to do. In order to get this to be a mast, it has to be pretty tall, right? And as you can see right now, it's totally a flat shape. So probably what I should do is start by maybe finding the center of this object. And you can see that we have the center picked on the OSnap menu. Really, that might not work here because it's an irregular shape, so it might not have a center. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to grab the line tool and just let the snaps kind of go. And as you can see, it's like if I turn grid snap off, that might help. It's not really like finding a center. It's finding the center of each of the circles, but that's not what we want. I want this center. So what we have to do is we have to kind of maybe do it the hard way. So I'm just going to grab a line and draw a line here. Probably the midpoint of this line is the center that we're looking for. So I have midpoint selected in the OSnap, so hopefully that'll work out just fine. So let's see if I can draw a point here on the midpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a vertical line that would be maybe in the front or the right view, but I'm going to start here in the top view so that I can access this point. And then I can go over here, and I can make my line just as tall as I please. So I'm going to hit the Shift key so I know that it's straight up and down. And that's great. So now I'm going to take this form at the bottom, and I'm going to push it up to basically extrude it towards the mast. But what do we know about the masts of ships? they're not like telephone poles, right? They're not like cylindrical. They're actually tapered, and they come to a point at the top, right? So we're going to have to use the method here of extrude planar curve to point. And that's the reason why I drew that vertical line. You don't technically need a vertical line to extrude things straight, right? But you need a vertical line to have a point to extrude things to. So in this case, extrude planar curve to point. And I'm just going to click on this point up here. Done. And let's just take a look at what this looks like in the perspective view so you can really see it. So that's what it looks like right now. So we're getting there. And next, we basically need to take this and spin it around and twist it. So the twisting is, by the way, this is a solid, just automatically because it's closed. And yeah. So we're going to go ahead and go straight to transform twist. There it is. And so it says select object to twist. Well, that would be this one. Start of twist axis. So start of the twist axis is probably down here somewhere. Actually, if we could find that center point, that would be nice. Maybe if I hover over it. Nope. So sometimes when you can't kind of like snap to the object that you want, there's a couple of things you can do. One thing is just to sort of like flip it over in the perspective view and kind of force the issue. So that's the solution for this. Basically the snap there was so much other stuff. This is facing down, so it's just there's tons and tons of points that it's looking at. Where here, if you're facing the top, it's much more accessible and the snaps are a lot more likely to work. So that's one thing that I would definitely try. So here we've got end, intersection, midpoint right there. And then we're going to use that same top point for the top of the axis. Okay, and then it asks for, I'm going to really quickly flip this back over so you can see it. Then it asks for angle, so that can be pretty much arbitrary at this point. Do it right there. And then you basically start twisting. And so I think, not really sure how many turns I want to give it. That many, apparently. But that's basically like what you get at the end. Now, also, if you're sort of like, not geometrically inclined, what happens if you twist a circle? Or a cylindrical object? Nothing. So just FYI, I'll warn you about that in advance. So yeah, the object has to have some kind of irregularity, otherwise you won't see the twist. So now we've got this cool twisted object. I've got these circles. In this case, I'm probably just going to throw them away. And we've got this fun twisty object. So I'm probably going to go ahead and put it on, I'm just going to drag it, place it on the top, near the middle. As you can see, we have to kind of do a little bit of adjustment in one view. I'm going to hit the Shift key so it doesn't kind of, actually I'm going to hit Escape, Control Z. Now I'm going to hit the Shift key, and hopefully this will go straight up. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I prefer to just shift it into ortho mode, but yeah. Let's try the gumball. It's probably a more direct approach in this case. I have to say, I almost never use the gumball because, mostly just because it really bothers me. But in this case, yeah, it's good. It's good to have it on deck. So yeah, so basically I just kind of moved it into place, right? And we still have these sort of curves hanging out in the background. Let me go ahead and get rid of those. And so a couple of things. First of all, I would take this twisty object, the mast, and I'm going to move it over into the boat layer. Next, I'm going to take this twisty mast and, if you're designing things just for kind of on-screen preview, you could stop here. This would be totally fine. If you're designing things for 3D printing or other purposes, you really have to think about the intersections of things. So if you have two objects that are intersecting, in 3D printing land, that's usually considered a really bad thing. So you have to actually eliminate the intersections. So, and I'm thinking specifically just about this little chunk right here, okay? So if you take these two objects, I'm going to select them both, and you go to solid, and this only works with solids, by the way. So you can go to the Boolean toObjects function. And that's the one I would recommend that you use if you're kind of a newcomer and you're not used to Boolean operations. The reason being there's like 4 or 5 different kinds of Boolean operations, and Boolean toObjects is like a sampler platter. It lets you try each kind and kind of decide what you want. So I'm going to click Boolean toObjects, and you can see it says click to iterate through Boolean results. So down here you can also, whoops, down here, hey, come on, sorry. Down here you can see it says that this is a sample of the union, which union basically takes everything and eliminates the intersections and makes it sort of one thing. And that's definitely something that we would like to do. And then there's also intersection, which will sort of identify the intersection point. Looks actually like I might have messed things up here. I'm just going to double check that I selected that board and actually in this case the boat is not, sorry. So the boat's not really part of the thing, it's just the board that we're asking to intersect with. So I'm going to take these two objects and then go to Boolean toObjects. Okay, so now when we click through to iterate the results, will look a little bit different. So as I said, this is a union, which I think is actually the method that we're going to end up using, but I'd like to show you some of the other ones. Intersection, that will actually produce the object that is the intersection of the two forms. Useful. A minus B, I love holes. I put holes in stuff all the time. Like 90% of the time I use the Boolean functions to make holes. Because otherwise it's kind of annoying in Rhino. I mean, you can see how just making this surface, there was a lot of back and forth and trimming and stuff like that. And this kind of just eliminates all of that. And then, of course, there's the B minus A, which will take a chunk out of one of them. And then inverse intersection, which doesn't really apply here. And then go back to union. So basically, you click until you get the mode that you like. And then you kind of hit enter, and it'll apply that mode. So all of those modes that we just kind of walked through, they're also listed here. But I actually, even as long as I've been doing this, sometimes I don't know what mode I want. So I actually find it easier to just kind of shop for it and through the Boolean toObjects thing. So yeah. Okay, so there's our mast. And then I have one more sort of project for myself, and that is that I want to put wings on this thing so that it can fly out of here. And we are going to start with the control point curve. So I'm going to take the control point curve, and I'm just going to snap to any point on the rim here that looks reasonable. That looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and just draw the curve in the top view. And then after I draw the curve, and again, this is my personal preference, there are other ways to do it. after I draw the curve, I'm going to make it dimensional by adjusting the points. So there's that, and then I'll go ahead and just throw the other one in there. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how those look in the top view, although I think that this one could be maybe modified a little bit. I've got my gumball on, so it's oh so convenient. But yeah, the point editing is something that's not actually related to the gumball, but it is kind of cool to have the gumball for like points, so you could be more precise about editing them. Let's see. Well, okay. We can always change it later. And then the big thing is I really want to take these points and go ahead and make the wing appear more dimensional. So I'm going to grab one of these curves. And in this case, again, like I'm going to turn the gumball off because I just feel like it's kind of like more than I need at this point. So probably what I would like to do is to take this point and this point and this point, and you can select multiple points at a time and drag them down. I think we actually want the wings go like this, right? Not like this. Okay, I don't know. So something like that maybe, and then this one, we'll take these 2 points and also like kind of raise that up. I don't want these lines to be really like symmetrical, and also I probably want to just come in here and take the 1 point, you know, and just so they're not like simple curves. I think this one could maybe come down a bit. And so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double check that things didn't get too crazy. That looks pretty good. Things look fine. And okay, so that's fantastic. And then actually, let me see if our wireframe is still there. Okay, so great. I'm actually going to use that wireframe that I stuck in the storage layer and didn't think I was going to use anymore. And the reason I'm going to use the wireframe is because I need the curve that goes from here to here. And so in order to do that, we're just going to make the boat invisible for now. I'm going to bring my construction curve layer up, and I'm going to use that trim function again. So here, let's see, the trim is here. And so actually, I'm selecting the cutting objects, which are these 2 little lines that intersect. And then I'm just going to get rid of this bit again, here and here. Looks like there was an extra curve there, which happens sometimes. So that's no problem. Okay, and then I'm going to hit done. And then I'm going to grab this curve, and I'm going to transfer it to the boat layer. So change object layer. All right, and now I can turn my boat layer back on and turn this layer off. And now I have a little curve there, which we'll hopefully pick up later. Now, I'm also going to use the edge curves function here. In this case, you may be saying to yourself, yeah, but Meg, like, there's no curve on the end here. And guess what? Rhino, if you give it 3 curves, it'll make it up for you. It'll just say, this is what I think it should be. And usually it's pretty good. So we are OK with just 3 curves. And I'm going to go in here to curve. Sorry, surface. Let's see, edge curves. And then we're going to select these open curves. And so there you can see my little curve is there. Alrighty. So that looks less than ideal. So I'm just going to real quickly finish off this edge. Sometimes the edge creation will work really nicely, and sometimes it doesn't look so great. So in this case, it's probably better off that I use 4 curves. So that's the kind of stuff you just kind of have to learn by experimentation. And then here, and then that looks more like kind of what we were probably expecting. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and take this wing, and we know we probably need 2 of them. So we can totally make them distinct, but in order to do that, we still have to go ahead and copy this one over. So there's a couple of ways that we could do this. One way would be to just use the mirror function and make sure that copy is checked, and then you can go over to the other side by selecting a mirror plane. So from here, we can keep the wings symmetrical if we want, or we could certainly, like edit the points of one to make them kind of distinct. Probably the best thing to do would be to, keep them symmetrical, personally. So there's one more thing that we have to do, and that is, before we kind of move forward, we're going to spend some more time kind of working on this object and this environment. But one thing that I wanted to tell you about in order to sort of like get us started for this assignment is we're talking about the idea of working with environments. And so an environment, in this context, it's a little bit meaningless, but it's really just a shape that holds other shapes, right? So in this case, we're thinking a lot of people choose to use like domestic interiors, or some people like make space capsules. Your environment can really be anything, but the idea is to make a shape that is containing a bunch of stuff, right? But also, crucially, we really need to see through that shape. And rather than getting into sort of like transparency and all that stuff, we're just basically going to take our shape, which in this case, I'm going to make a box, a really big one. And notice that I'm not quite creating it in the right place. So I am making a really big box relative to the object. And what I want to show you in our last 60 seconds here is, obviously we can't really see through this box right now because it's a solid, right? And what we need to do is we need to basically explode it. And by exploding it into surfaces, we can then take some of those surfaces and delete them and get what is called a cutaway view. So that's basically how you would kind of get started with your environment and the cutaway view. I would definitely recommend that you put your environment on its own layer, because you don't want to have a situation where you're sort of constantly trying to fight against snapping to the environment when you're really trying to work on the thing that's inside of it. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, sure. So, okay, so this object right here, I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to name it really quickly, just like you would name any other file. I'll call it maybe room. And then if you double-click or double-tap on a trackpad or right-click, you would just go to select it and go Change Object Layer, and that will transfer it to the other layer. Yeah, and so basically when we come back on Thursday, we're going to be talking about how to really sort of start to get objects into our environment. We're going to make a couple more objects. I'd like to make the wings so that they have sort of like a grid that comes across them rather than just being these diaphanous sort of sheet-like things. And yeah, that's the plan. So I'll see you all again on Thursday, and have a great couple of days. And thanks for those questions. Those were all really good questions. Thank you. Bye.